Hey everyone, Shaun Stevenson here, author of the Throne series, and I am so excited to talk about this book. I did not know much about the Spinetinglers series by M.T. Coffin. Not really by M.T. Coffin, that's definitely a pseudonym, but that's okay. But I didn't know much about this series, and then I saw that Austin over at Monster Blood, his channel, I'll link to it down below, he had talked about this book on a video, I believe. Yes. And or no, it was on his Goodreads. He had talked about this book on his Goodreads, and I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. I'm kind of curious about this. And so I picked it up and I read it, and I loved this book. This book was so good. What book am I talking about? I'm talking about number 9, Step on a Crack. Watch your back, Mom. Oh, this was so great. I actually was planning to read this for Mother's Day. I know, I'm sorry, Mom. I'm reading a spooky book on Mother's Day, but that's okay. But I was planning on reading this for Mother's Day, and then it kind of had nothing to do with moms. It just is like the saying, like step on a crack or you'll break your, don't step on a crack or you'll break your mother's back, or don't step on a crack or you'll fall and break your back, that whole saying. But this book was actually so good. I loved the mystery. I loved the horror elements. I loved the creature that is here, like the history. It was just everything that I absolutely love. I will say, to me, this had a tiny bit of a fantasy vibe and an apocalyptic story vibe, because this reminded me of all the best like 80s and early 90s books and movies and series where there's like a world ending event that could happen. And I don't always love when those kinds of stories go to a place where it's like bleak. I don't like the bleak versions of those. Like, for instance, all those disaster movies. I'm not, like, I'll watch them, but I'm not a super big fan of the style of story those are. Like, for instance, like 2012. I liked that movie, but I don't really love the bleakness in that story, if that makes sense. And this had none of that kind of bleakness. I know some people might like that. I don't like that. I like it to be very intense and adventurous, and there's got to be a way to stop this. And then they have to find the clues to solve the way to figure it out. And that was what this book was. I so enjoyed this book so much. Okay, so here is the setup. This book begins in like 650 years ago. You have a Native American tribe that is fighting this creature. And we don't know anything about the creature. It doesn't really say anything yet. It doesn't tell us much about it, but the Native American tribe is fighting this creature. And then we flash forward to today. And well, or the 90s. So, and there's this kid whose name is Billy, and he has his like 5 friends, and they're like a crew, and they do all this stuff together. And they're going to be going into gym class, and they have the challenge to climb the rope. Now, I don't really know if they do the rope climbing thing anymore, so I don't know if kids today would know what this is. But back in the day, in the 90s in gym class, in PE, we would always have like these rope climbing days where it's like this big giant rope hooked to the ceiling, you had to climb it, and there's literally, underneath you is just like a padded mat that's like maybe this thick, and and so, like, it was kind of dangerous, I'm not gonna lie, but I loved it so much. It was always so fun. And then sometimes my PE teacher, he would stack those foldable mats, and then set up a stack here and set up a stack over here, and then he would set the rope so we could swing across to the other side. It was the best PE days ever. I loved it. I loved it so much. But anyways, Billy and his friends, they're going to be doing this rope climbing challenge in PE, and they suddenly have this feeling like they need to know how to climb, because if they don't, something bad's going to happen. They need to know how to climb. And so this kind of set off this eerie beginning to this book. One of the things that's interesting about this particular book is you do have a creature here. I'm not going to tell you anything about the creature because it is so good and I don't want to spoil anything about it. But I will say one of the interesting things about this creature is that there are chapters from its point of view. much like in a Mysterious book by Matt McMahon, which I thought, oh, that's really interesting. And so this book has this creature, and it's from its point of view, these like short little like 2 to 3 to 4 page chapters where you get like the menacing like just feeling from this creature and the ominous like level of what is happening in the background of this book is so good. And Billy, he's not believed by anyone when he starts to tell people there's something coming after us. And I don't know what it is. I can only feel it, that it is watching us and that it knows where we are. So no one believes Billy. No one thinks that he's like making any sense. They think he's like losing it. And he knows that there is something lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for him to step on a crack. So this book, like I said, was so good. This is so intense. There is so much action and adventure. The final section of the book is a really well done, like I could see it in my head, like the final movie sequence with the final battle between the creature and the main characters. And it just was so much fun. So for character development, it's kind of interesting because you have the main character, Billy, who at first when he tries telling people things, they are not listening to him. They make fun of him. They're laughing at him. Some of the parents think that he's losing it. They're kind of like feeling upset about it. And they call his parents, who his dad is a psychiatrist, which is so interesting. And it's a very fascinating setup because you have a situation where Billy has something he needs to get off his chest. He needs to talk about it. But even his own dad, a psychiatrist, is kind of blowing him off a little bit and just saying, oh, no, it's not a problem. Like, what are you talking about? And so he doesn't know who to turn to and who to talk to. And he feels like the people that he should be able to tell, his friends, his family, just aren't listening to him. But then there is someone later on that does listen to him. And I think that that was an important thing for, especially for kids to know that, like, yes, you do need to talk about what's going on in your life. Like, tell an adult. Even if the first adult maybe doesn't listen to you, tell another one that you trust. Because I think that that's a really important message for kids to hear. Like, you should talk about what's going on in your life and let them know. And obviously here it's like a fantasy situation where there's like a creature, but I think that's an important message for kids to take away. And I think that that's really well done in this book. This book definitely has like the action, the ominous feeling of very evil creature that I loved. It was so good. I love a good villain. I love a good villain. And I love when a good villain has like just simple motivations that make sense. Sometimes there are books with villains that are just like evil for evil's sake. And it's just like, well, okay, just to be evil, like what's like why? Like did something happen? Do they want something? Like what's going on here? And in this book, there's a very simple motivation, but it's very menacing and I think something that is super creepy and well done and makes sense. So it was really good. This book just had like this feeling of history to it, with the beginning moments from the prologue from 650 years ago to there's some other elements in the story that are kind of like back in history and back in time, and there feels like this whole lived universe underneath the story that's happening. So I just really liked this book quite a bit. I will say, there was a tiny little bit of some plot holes near the end that I thought, well, wait a minute, why doesn't it just do this? I kind of thought like, well, that's a little bit of a plot hole, but I was able to kind of look past it because it was just so much fun. The action was great. It was just so well done. I just really enjoyed it. Now, one thing I got to talk about. I am a children's pastor, so I'm always intrigued when religion gets brought up in books, and especially Christianity, because obviously I'm part of that. So I'm always intrigued, like, how is it presented? Like, what is said about it? And I've got to say, the church that's presented in this book is not really that accurate. In the book, there's a scene in a church where there's a pastor who's talking about, God says if people who help themselves, God will help them. And I was like, that's like not actually a part of Christianity. Like that's like a pop culture thing that's thought about Christianity and thought about God. And actually, like according to like if you like look at the Bible at who God is, like God is actually going ahead of people to help them in a lot of ways, and not according to Christianity, not like just waiting for someone to do something and then God says, oh, okay, I'll help you now. But it rather is like God is going ahead of us to help us in a lot of ways. So that's kind of an interesting thing that I thought, that's kind of an odd portrayal of a church service by someone who maybe, I don't know, hasn't been to church. I don't know. It was one of those things that part did not ring authentic to me. So I kind of was like, I don't know about that one, but okay. I'll go past it. And it was kind of used as this big character building moment for Billy. And I just thought, that's really odd. And I feel like you could have done this a different way. So that's my 2 cents on that. As a pastor, thinking about that section of the book, I thought, meh. So whatever. It's fine though. I was able to move past it and just be like, whatevs. So at the end of the day, how do I rate this book? So I will give Step on a Crack, maybe this is surprising to some people, but a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really liked this book. Like I said, I think at the very end, there were just like a couple of plot holes that I thought, well, wait a second, you could have done this and that would have worked. But other than that, I thought it was so good. And of course, that church scene that I was kind of like, okay, this is a little ridiculous, but okay. So at the end of the day, though, this was a great book. If you can find this one, definitely worth reading, especially if you like Goosebumps, you like Ghosts of Fear Street, all those kinds of books. This is a great book. I really enjoyed it. So until next time, everybody, keep reading. Bye.